Consider a few scenarios that may already be familiar to you. A professional cyclist facing enormous commercial pressure is offered a performance-enhancing substance that is technically legal but medically controversial. A football club recruits talents from lower-income communities while offering those young athletes minimal educational support. Or a National Olympic Committee must decide whether to allow transgender athletes to compete in categories aligned with their gender identity. What do these scenarios have in common? They go beyond mere technical or legal answers. They demand that we think carefully about the different values and understandings involved, such as fairness, excellence, identity, and the very purpose of sport. This raises a fundamental question that will guide our webinar today. How can we relate sport to philosophy? To address that question, we will move through 3 steps. We begin by asking what philosophy actually is and why it is a useful lens for sport. We then examine 3 classical frameworks that give us different ways of defining and evaluating sport. Finally, we bring those frameworks to bear on a concrete ethical problem, discrimination in sport, through the practice of Socratic dialogue. What is philosophy and why does it matter for sport? The word philosophy derives from the Greek philosophia, the love of wisdom. Notice that it is a desire and not a possession. Socrates, widely regarded as the founding figure of Western philosophy, famously insisted, "I know that I know nothing." His entire philosophical method was built on the admission of ignorance, the recognition that our first instinct is often to assume we understand something when we do not. Philosophy, at its core, is the discipline of returning to first questions, the questions that seem so basic when we tend to skip past them. What is being? What constitutes genuine knowledge? Who am I? How do I relate to others? What is the good thing to do? The value of these questions does not lie in their resolutions, but in the continuous progress of asking them together. We can transpose these questions directly into the domain of sport. What is sport? What is good sport? What should sport be about? And how do we deal with disagreement and doubt within sporting culture? What kind of sport do we want to see in the future? These are not rhetorical questions. They are live philosophical problems, and the frameworks we are about to examine offer powerful tools for approaching them. The 3 frameworks we will explore offer different ways of understanding the nature of sport and different lenses for discussion. They span from classical Greece to modernity, and each illuminates something the others leave in shadow. Arete and Egon. Athletics and philosophy share a common cultural ideal rooted in the concept of arete. Typically translated as virtue or excellence, the Greek meaning is broader. It refers to the quality or set of qualities that make something excellent at what it is designed to do. The comfort and the durability of a sandal, the sharpness and balance of a sword, or the courage and wisdom of a human being. This ideal was enacted in the classical Olympic Games, which ran almost a millennium in the forms of agones. The agon was a contest, a rule-governed competition designed to identify winners through specific tests of capability. The sprint, the javelin throw, the wrestling match. But crucially, this competition was always understood to serve a higher educational purpose. It was a means, not an end. The relationship to philosophy is just as direct. Plato, whose wrestling coach gave him his name from platoon, meaning broad-shouldered, replacing his birth name Aristocles, taught at the academy, a site of both philosophical inquiry and ceremonial games. The gymnasium and the lyceum, terms we still use for educational institutions, were places for both physical and intellectual training. One of Plato's dialogues, Euphedemus, is set in the changing room of the Lyceum, and Plato describes his interlocutors there as absolutely all-round fighters, not restricted to physical fighting. Most tellingly, in the Philebus, a dialogue in which Socrates examines the importance of pleasure in human life, Socrates says, "So let us get ready like athletes to form a line of attack around this problem." Socratic dialogue was itself a form of agon, competitive, demanding, governed by rules of thought, but aimed beyond winning at the higher goals of truth and virtue. Our second framework comes from Johan Huizinga, a Dutch cultural historian who, on the eve of the Second World War, published Homo Ludens, a study of the play element in culture. His central claim is radical. Play is older than culture, for culture, however inadequately defined, always presupposes human society, and animals have not waited for man to teach them their playing. For Huizinga, play is a free activity, not undertaking for profit, yet one that absorbs the player intensely and utterly. Play forms a magic circle, an alternative reality temporarily sealed off from the concerns and calculations of everyday life. Play has its own time, its own space, and its own rules, and it generates communities that distinguish themselves from the ordinary world. Yet, Homo Ludens also contains a lament. Huizinga observes that in modern industrialized societies, the play element is being systematically eroded by professionalization. As he writes, "The spirit of the professional is no longer the true play spirit. It is lacking in spontaneity and carelessness." The philosophical importance of this framework lies in how it reimagines what it means to be human as a playful, creative being. And it prompts a critical question. Is the play element still present in modern sport? Is there genuine freedom, absorption, and disinterestedness, or have commercial pressures colonized the experience entirely? Our third framework comes from the Canadian philosopher Bernard Suits, who in The Grasshopper, Games, Life and Utopia, offers a precisely structured account of what it means to play a game. Suits identifies 4 essential characteristics of a game. Every game has a pre-illusory goal, a state of affairs that can be described independently of the game itself, such as scoring more goals than the opponent. Every game also has a illusory goal, the game's specific objective, that gives the activity its particular form, such as scoring with the foot according to the football rules. Games further require constitutive rules, the specific permitted means of reaching that goal, such as the laws governing fouls and offside. And finally, games demand a illusory attitude, the voluntary acceptance of precisely those constitutive rules. This leads Suits to his celebrated definition. Playing a game, or sports in this case, is the voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. The obstacles in sport are not obstacles in ordinary sense, they are self-imposed constraints that make the activity meaningful. You could score by hand, you choose not to do so, because the constraint is the point. The philosophical importance of this framework lies in showing that these self-imposed constraints are not arbitrary limitations, but the very conditions of human flourishing through play. We began this webinar with 3 ethical scenarios involving discrimination and fairness in sport. Let us now return to them, but this time equipped with a philosophical method. Socrates himself modeled the approach, so let us get ready like athletes to form a line of attack around this problem. Why is Socratic dialogue particularly well suited to the problem of discrimination in sport? Precisely because discrimination is rarely a simple matter of facts. It is a matter of contested values, hidden assumptions, and competing interpretations of fairness. the kind of terrain where policy alone cannot take us far enough. When we discuss whether a transgender athlete should be allowed to compete, or why prize money in women's sport remains lower than in men's, we are not just debating regulations. We are debating what sport is for, who it belongs to, and which values should govern it. These are philosophical questions, and they require a philosophical method. The Socratic dialogue can be structured in 5 stages. First, set the stage. Frame the discussion as a collaborative match, where the goal is not to defeat others, but to uncover values and truths together. The adversarial spirit of the agon is present, but it is placed in service of understanding. Second, use a question and answer format. Encourage participants to ask questions, to build on each other's points, and to formulate concise answers rather than speeches. The discipline of giving a direct answer is itself philosophically demanding. Third, attend explicitly to wrestling with ideas. Give careful attention to the different understandings, experiences, and values that participants bring. Disagreement is not a problem to be managed, it is the material for the dialogue. Fourth, ask clarifying questions. What do you mean by discrimination? What do you mean when you say that sport should be fair? Why do you think this regulation would work? These questions do not change the subject, they sharpen it. And fifth, close with actionable insights. Summarize the key dilemmas and truths that the dialogue has uncovered and encourage participants to identify one concrete action they could take to address discrimination in their own clubs or communities. Philosophy, on this account, is not only a theoretical exercise, it is a preparation for practice. We have covered considerable ground. We have seen that sport and philosophy share ancient roots in the context of the academy. We have examined 3 philosophical frameworks: the Greek ideal of athletic and intellectual excellence, Huizinga's conception of play as the primary formative element of culture, and Suitzer's account of games as the voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. And we have glimpsed how Socratic dialogue can serve as a practical tool for navigating difficult ethical questions in sport. The remaining question, the one we leave as an open invitation, is the most important. What kind of sport do we want to see in the future? Answering it requires exactly the kind of sustained, critical, and philosophically informed dialogue we have been practicing here today.